friends, 2026 is here. There's so much to look forward to. I'm so thrilled. I would like to use this first episode to reintroduce myself on this channel. I'm Claudia and I've been living in Scotland since 2020. I moved during the pandemic to chase my academic dreams of earning a doctorate in medieval history and making academia my permanent work home. It was a dream to be at a world-class university, but then that dream eventually became a toxic experience that added more trauma to my life and led me into the deepest depression. I was born and raised on the south side of Chicago. My parents immigrated from Mexico and our home reflected that. I loved school and I always loved the idea of being a creative, but I knew it wasn't practical enough for my cultural background. I remember the few art classes that I did get to take at the primary and secondary level. They were fun and I was curious to know more. But with a firm rejection from my mother regarding my inclination to making art my major in high school, I pleased my family and committed to accountancy. I was told that I didn't have the privilege to pursue what I wanted, that I was either problematic or wrong, that I needed fixing, that I should settle. I slowly began basing my happiness on pleasing others and distrusting my inner voice. I didn't understand that I was incrementally giving up on myself, and the damage that was taking place was going to impact me in ways that which would never be fully reversible. I wish I could say that my parents were always on my side, cheering me on, respecting me enough so I could organically develop into who I truly am from the moment I stepped foot into a classroom and began expanding my horizons. The truth is, my home environment was toxic. There is no question whether my parents love me or my siblings, and there is no question that they put a roof over our head, food in our bellies, and prioritized our education. But along the way, their approach overstepped, and their inability to address their own trauma created trauma for me. I experienced depression at an early age, and I just coped, thinking it was a normal way to address these things without the need for professionals, that I needed to pull myself out of it. Being in therapy for 3 years now, I know the way I cope is a direct result of the trauma that I experienced when I was young. It was another moment which taught me that I was never the issue. I was never the problem. Creativity soon found me again, this time through literature. I held onto it dearly. I devoted myself to improving my writing and becoming familiar with all the well-known Anglo writers. I had finally stumbled on a creativity that I can harness along with my accounting studies. This continued through university, but I struggled to feel any connection to the accounting curriculum. My grades never showed it because I couldn't do that to my dad, who worked long and hard in the factory to pay for my tuition. However, I just didn't fit in with the business college, and the individual that I was becoming just did not agree with my parents' philosophy of life. My entry into the corporate world wasn't any better. I felt robotic as I reconciled financial statements for clients. I was a believer in the humanities, and yet there I was in the beating heart of capitalism. And unfortunately, each accounting position came with experiences that left me feeling less than a decomposed turd. I fell into what I now know was a severe depression. I couldn't get out of bed, I cried a lot, and thought to myself, what was the point of life? This was one type of battle, but the moment I decided to reroute, the worst was far from over. I was breaking the traditional mold that my parents had hoped for me to stay stuck in. In return, I received verbal abuse in a space where my bed lay. The level of unhealthiness around me as I pivoted my career had risen to new heights. Yes, my bitterness and silence became my shield, but the hurt coming from the people who should be the most accepting and loving always found its way in and nearly broke me. Once again, I was the issue. I was to blame for my own unhappiness. Why couldn't I just be happy? Why was I ungrateful? Why couldn't I be different? The prospect of moving to Scotland was basically my only opportunity to elevate my inner creative voice and exit the toxic environment that was my home. It was finally going to be my permanent departure from all the pressure to not be me. It's sad to admit that I distanced myself from my Mexican culture as I blamed it for keeping my voice silent and unvalidated. My move meant leaving behind my trauma and building a safe place for myself without having to hide, filter, or deny. When the time came to report my PhD supervisor to the director of the School of History for their lack of supervision, I was disrespected and demeaned in a way that I've never been. As in the corporate world, I was taken advantage of. But this time, I was met with the racism that white privileged men resort to when they haven't done their job and rely on technicality. I was forced out of my program as I wasn't presented with any options that would set me up for successfully completing my doctorate degree. Once again, I was told that I was the problem, I was the issue. It was my fault that my PhD experience came about this way. I didn't belong. Rerouting had taken me more than 10 years, and now I had nothing. As I mentioned earlier, the deepest depression consumed me for the next 3 years. I cried so much, I was triggered by everything. My anger drowned me, and I wailed in closed rooms at night when my partner was sleeping to let it out. I shut down and went weeks without talking to my partner. Eventually, I gave in to medication because therapy just wasn't cutting it, and my marriage was being compromised. If you would have told me back then that I would not only be able to move forward, but begin to dream again and work as a creative, I wouldn't have believed a single word. Art, more specifically illustration, entered my life when the waves of depression were still all over the place. I picked up a pencil, chose a reference image, and began to draw. My mind quieted, and it felt good. I felt peace, a peace I wasn't getting from running or writing or any other extracurricular. I drew again and again, and when I finally bought my first box of color pencils and added color to my illustrations, I felt a smile grow across my face that I couldn't understand. This channel isn't just about starting over in terms of career, it's about starting over in life, when all you can do is move forward and changes at every corner. As of now, I'm a first-gen Mexican American, a UK immigrant, a wife, a stepmom, and a dog mom. All of this defines my art and content. This channel is about fully embracing who I am. I'm reconnecting with my inner Nina and culture. I'm committing to what brings me joy and inspiration, regardless of how untraditional it is. I'm starting over because I never authentically started. So there you have it. That's my story. It's far from ideal, but I do think it's the gray areas that help us to connect with each other. So if you're interested in joining me on this journey of figuring out life here in Scotland, please subscribe. I think we all have individual stories and struggles, but together we can help each other out. I publish on a weekly basis, and I'm over the moon about the changes that are coming to this channel. So please subscribe and don't miss out. Bye.